Right, so we got some new polling in today. There's been some lag with polling. They're not releasing a lot of polls right now for whatever reason. Of course, it's the holiday season, but other than that, polls have been really scarce in general. I know Andrew Yang this week called out the polling, mostly because he's on the fringe of making the next debate. And in order to make the next debate, you need polls done so you can get the qualifying numbers. And there haven't been qualifying polls in the first four primary states for about a month or over a month since mid-November. So Andrew Yang sent a letter to the DNC, and they basically said, not a problem. They're just going to let the private entities do what they do with polling, and whatever happens, happens. They're not concerned with doing any extra polling. But anyway, Morning Consult does this poll every single week. I enjoy this poll because they have huge sample sizes. So you can see right here, 18,000 surveys. Their plus or minus margin of error is only 1, and that's better than the polls that they do that CNN uses. That's a plus or minus of 4 in the margin of error that only have sample sizes of like 400 people. This is a good sample size. Um, so the entire race right now is basically where it's been. Um, if you look a year before today, these numbers are pretty much the same. Joe Biden is still keeping this lead. This is a bigger lead than Joe Biden had in the last Morning Consult poll. Bernie Sanders is back in second place. Elizabeth Warren is dropped below the 15% threshold. Remember, you have to get at least 15% in each state to qualify for any delegates. So if you don't get 15%, you don't get any delegates. So the only two people that are definitely going to get delegates amongst every single state are these two guys. You have Pete Buttigieg, 8%, but he is polling good in Iowa, so he could get delegates from Iowa because he probably will get 15% or more of the vote. Bloomberg, this is his third week in the campaign. He is spending over $100 million. He has spent over $100 million, and he already almost doubled the support of Andrew Yang, who's been going at it for almost a year now. He's at 4% nationally of every Democratic primary voter. And that's an issue for him right now because his base is all grassroots. So if they see that he can't get near that 15% threshold that's required to get delegates, a lot of them will jump back to Bernie Sanders, will jump to someone else who has a better chance to actually get delegates. Because if you vote for a Yang, but you also love Sanders and he doesn't get 15%, Yang doesn't get 15%, then it is literally a wasted vote, especially if Yang is polling at 3% going into one of the early states. So that's what we'll look at next. I don't care about these guys. They're out of it as far as the national stage is concerned. Now, when you go into the early states, we see an interesting trend I noticed last week. Tom Steyer is somehow polling at 10% in the first four primary states. And this can't be tracked very well because they're not doing very many polls in the first primary states. So if you look at the race right now, Tom Steyer has a better chance to get delegates in the early primary states or the same chance as Pete Buttigieg does. And no one is reporting on this. No one's expecting this. That will be insane. As far as the rest of the race, Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders last week, Joe Biden was at 29%, Bernie Sanders was at 24%. That was only a 5-point gap. Now, in the early primary states, Bernie Sanders is down 16 points to Joe Biden. I'm not sure what happened in 1 week. I'm not sure if it's just random that they polled more people that enjoyed Biden, that are for Biden, or what. Warren drops a little bit in the early primary states. Buttigieg rises a little bit in the early primary states. Tom Steyer, of course, at 10%. Cory Booker, I'm surprised about in the first primary states. He is at 4% right now. That might be due to the dropout of Kamala Harris. Klobuchar is polling pretty well in Iowa. She has somewhat of a chance to get around 9% of the vote in Iowa, but it's really not going to be a factor. She's not really in this. Andrew Yang at 3% again in the early primary states. For a guy like him who's grassroots and his supporters pay attention to politics immensely, that might scare some away because they know if they vote for him and he doesn't get 15% in the polls, they're effectively wasting a vote. And I'm not saying wasting a vote as in what they say during the general election when you vote for a third party because you don't believe in the first two options. I mean wasting a vote in the sense that if you like Yang and Sanders the same, or if you like Yang and Warren the same, then if you're voting for Yang, who you like equally to Sanders, when he cannot get any delegates, then you're voting against what you want. So if you do love Andrew Yang, I don't think you're wasting a vote, obviously. No one does because you're voting what you feel, who you feel the best candidate is, so no one can criticize you for that. So the trend over time, of course, we've seen Biden stay at the top, not really fall at all. Sanders is rising back up, took over from Warren. Warren had that one little flash in the light, but now she's back down. Her fundraising is dipping. Second choice is this is huge. So I'm gonna do a separate video for this.